Today I'm gonna be talking about a bunch of things that might be anime. A lot of people have wondered over the years what makes something an anime, and to be quite honest, that's probably one of those things where no matter what you say, everyone's gonna have a different answer. Is it an art style? Is it a genre? What does an anime even look like? So many people think of it as Japanese cartoons, but looking at it harder produces a ton of examples that even I can't fully define. If you try and find the definition on Wikipedia, it's defined as hand-drawn and computer animation originating from Japan. That seems like a pretty straightforward answer, but I thought about it for a while, and that's not very specific, is it? What does originating from Japan even mean? Does that mean the people who wrote it are Japanese, or that the animation was physically drawn there? What even is an anime? Turns out, I have no idea what anime even is, but I'm still gonna take a look at a bunch of stuff that might count. How about we start with something simple? Cartoons. Cartoons aren't anime, right? Well, what about Saber Rider and the Star Sheriffs? Is that an anime? It started as a Japanese series called Star Musketeer Bismarck, but when they brought it to America, they rebranded it as a regular Saturday morning cartoon. Not only that, they even made a bunch of episodes just for the American market, making it a series that started as an anime and ended as a cartoon. These extra episodes don't even exist in Japanese, so what would you say? Are they anime? Another weird one is the Mighty Orbots. Japanese director, Japanese writers, and it was even animated by TMS, a Japanese studio that's done everything from Lupin III to episodes of Tiny Toon Adventures. It's probably best known as that one show that got sued so hard into the ground that it discouraged any other companies from making more robot shows in the 1980s. Apparently, the idea of combining robots was a thing that you could physically own back then. So a Transformers rival called the GoBots sued them and won. This ruined all of their plans for any other robot shows in America, so they ended up following it up with something called Galaxy High instead. But hang on, that's not an anime, right? I mean, it was written by the guy who did Home Alone. Although it's definitely a cartoon, it's surprisingly more anime than you would first think. Since they couldn't bring robot shows to America, their backup plan was to cash in on the anime Urusei Yatsura instead. That show was about an alien girl living on Earth, so their idea was just to send some kids into outer space and hope that it would sell in the United States market. Didn't really do all that well, but they traced over a bunch of Urusei Yatsura just to make it, so I don't know, parts of this are anime, right? This trend of trying to copy anime didn't really even go away in the 1980s. You've even got modern shows pretending to be anime. Did you know that they made a show based on the video game Castlevania? I mean, probably not, they stopped making those games ages ago. But it does sort of look like an anime, doesn't it? I really wouldn't hold it against you if you thought that this was from Japan. I mean, the show's website even says horror anime on it, plain as day. But it was actually animated in my favorite Japanese prefecture, Texas. Now, I don't really know a lot about anime, but I think it's pretty safe to say if something was made in the United States, then it's probably closer to a cartoon. How about the opposite? If a show gets made in Japan, but it adapts an American property, what do you call it then? One example of that is Little Lulu and Her Little Friends. The show was marketed as a cartoon in the United States, but we never got more than 2 VHS tapes here in America, making it incredibly hard to sit down and watch this. It also doesn't help that eBay is always flooded with literally hundreds of bootleg VHS tapes for the 1950s version. I don't know what it is about public domain cartoons on VHS, but half the time, the box art is absolutely horrifying. I mean, look at this. Some of these don't even look like cartoons, let alone anime. So what do you think? Does this look like an anime to you? If you said yes, then you're right. The entire thing is a Japanese production from beginning to end, and even though it doesn't look like it, yep, that's an anime. Anime doesn't even need to be in Japanese. Just ask Cypher the Video, the anime done in English with Japanese subtitles for the full New York City experience. So if it's not an art style, and it doesn't matter what language it's in or what the show is actually about, does the country define it or the people who made it? I'd say if it was a product of Japan, then it's probably not a cartoon. But where does cartoon end and anime even begin? Depending on how much of the production was Japanese, the answer could go either way. How about the TV series Moomins? Is that an anime? Most people are familiar with the show from the 1990s, but in 1969, Japan released a Moomin series that was radically different from the one that we all know and love today. It was a Japanese show based on a Finnish book, and apparently departed so much from the source material that it never left Japan. In the 90s, they made a sequel series that followed the books a little bit more closely, and it ended up being a Finnish-Dutch-Japanese co-production just so they could get the story right. But again, is it even an anime if it wasn't completely produced by Japan? Would you call this a Dutch cartoon or a Japanese anime? Another weird one is Oban's Star Racers. This show actually aired on TV in America, so you might have watched it on a lazy Sunday morning. It's a European show with a ton of Japanese influence, but most of it was done in Japan by a team of Japanese people, and even has an anime-style intro to go with it, so who knows. One step even further than that, you got Cyber 6, a show made by 3 different countries. It was based on an Argentinian comic book, animated by a Japanese studio, and produced in Canada, making it a Canadian-Japanese Argentinian animation. But why stop at just 2 or 3 countries? Alfred J. Quack is a Dutch, German, Spanish, Japanese animated comedy drama television series produced by Telecable BV in co-production with Vara, ZDF, Television Española, and TV Tokyo from 1989. So is it an anime? I'll let you guys figure that one out. Let's not forget about Double Zeta Gundam, the show that tells you it's definitely not an anime right to your face. The very first thing that it says when you turn it on is anime janai, literally, it's not anime in Japanese. So who do I believe? The show telling me what it is, or some Wikipedia article? Speaking of Gundam, there's also the Doozy Bots, an American series that never even got announced. History doesn't record why Sunrise didn't just dub the anime that they already had into English, but the result was equal parts hilarious and kinda horrifying. There's probably a timeline where people watched Mobile Suit Doozy Unicorn and Mobile Suit Doozy Wing. It's the kind of thing that really keeps me up at night. Here's the real question though. Would you call this a cartoon, or would you call this an anime? Is it an anime if it never got announced, it was made for the United States market, and it never got turned into a show? It seems like anime just needs to be a product of Japan and animated. If it isn't both of those things, then it probably doesn't count. Speaking of animated, what even is animation? I'm not trying to be smart here. I legitimately have no idea where you draw the line. Stop motion is a type of animation, right? If the Swiss cartoon Pingu was made in Japan, would that be an anime? Lucky for us, that actually happened, so we don't have to come up with a bunch of hypothetical Pingu anime theories in this video. In 2017, Japan made Pingu in the Big City. It's a Japanese adaptation of a stop-motion cartoon made entirely for Japanese and Swiss television, but it's not an anime because it's made out of clay. I mean, what moron would call this an anime? Me. I'd call this an anime. Despite how it looks, the whole series is, believe it or not, entirely computer generated. So even though it looks like clay, yup, that's an anime. But what if it was drawn on a computer in the 1980s, and it wasn't even 3D? I present to you the case for the Flying Luna Clipper. Created for an MSX2 gaming magazine, the Flying Luna Clipper is probably the weirdest thing that I have ever seen. It's animated, it was drawn on a Japanese computer, and it was made in Japan. By all accounts, I would say this is anime. What does that make the Rankin Bass Christmas specials then? I mean, The Life and Adventures of Santa Claus was made in Japan, so is that anime? Okay, as much as I want Nutcracker Fantasy to be on a bunch of top 10 anime videos, because that's an amazing movie, by the way, if you haven't seen that. They were made with models made out of wood, so they're not anime because they're not hand-drawn. If anything, they're closer to shows like Thunderbirds. Speaking of fantasy, and speaking of thunder, let's not forget Thunderbolt Fantasy, the Japanese show done entirely with puppets. Can you believe some people think this is anime? They're puppets. Anime is not puppets. None of it's hand-drawn, and, well, I guess technically there are some CG effects. There's not enough CG drawings to be an anime. I mean, you know, like if puppets are anime, then I guess shadow puppets are anime too, which raises way more questions that I'm willing to address in this video. Questions such as, if I go to Japan and make a shadow puppet with my hands, does it suddenly turn into an anime? Anime refers specifically to hand-drawn or CG animation, so stop motion and puppetry are just kind of their own things. They're their own genre. I don't think you'd call Sesame Street a cartoon, so you probably wouldn't call puppetry an anime. How about the Japanese art of paper theater? Is that anime? Well, you know, the artwork is moving and it might have a narrator, but it's not really animated by the strictest definition. Then you got variety shows like Pop Team Epic. One of the segments was done entirely by flipping pages on a notebook in real time. If you flip through a manga fast enough, does it suddenly turn into an anime? There's also animation on Japanese pachinko machines. If you're trying to watch new versions of classic anime like Kinnikuman, then odds are you're gonna have to go to a pachinko parlor just to see them. I would say they're not anime by virtue of being incomplete. The animation is anime, but Kinnikuman the pachinko machine isn't an anime, you know what I mean? They're just scenes from a TV show that people already know about. Then you have animation where the beginning and the end aren't even hand-drawn. I don't think you're gonna find a lot of people saying Dragon's Heaven isn't an anime, but you know, I could certainly see the argument. The middle section is hand-drawn, but the beginning and the end were done with plastic models, so it's mostly anime, right? How about shows with even less animation than that? This is Dinosaur Expedition Team Born Free, a series combining live-action models and hand-drawn animation. In America, we got a few episodes of this under the name Return of the Dinosaurs, so it's probably best known for its incredible English dub.
But waiting to attack is a vicious Allosaurus.
The Brontosaurus is attacking.
How about dinosaur for lunch with french fries?
No thanks, not hungry.
Chuck, drive Born Free. I'll direct operations from the Seagull.
Half the show is tokusatsu, and the other half is anime, but sometimes they even combine the two, Space Jam style. So it is an anime, but only around 50% of the time. There's also Dinosaur Die Senso Eisenborg, a show that was so popular that Saudi royalty commissioned a documentary about it in 2017. It was created by Subaraya, the people behind Ultraman, and takes the definition of what an anime can even be to some crazy places. It uses live-action suits like your typical tokusatsu show, but unlike Born Free, the show about rescuing dinosaurs, this show is just absolutely insane, even by 1970s standards. It honestly deserves its own video, so, you know, you're just gonna have to trust me when I say that there is absolutely nothing like it. These half-anime, half-live-action TV shows haven't been tried since, and really split the word anime right down the middle. And even further down the rabbit hole, we have things with so little animation that you question if they're even animated. 1970s series Chargeman Ken may look like a bootleg anime, making fun of another bootleg anime. But, you know, as much as people like to make fun of it, it is an anime because it is moving most of the time. Using that as a benchmark, how little animation can there be before something no longer counts? To find the answer, I had to work backwards from the least animated thing that I could possibly think of. This is Purple Eyes in the Dark, an animation with no dialogue, no story, and so little movement that it may not even count. It was made to promote a Japanese comic book in the 1980s, and may be the least animated thing that we can still realistically call an anime. It's comprised of still images set to music, but occasionally they do throw in a few seconds of animation. The rest of it is a kaleidoscope of surreal imagery and manga panels that make it seem more like a music video than a proper anime. According to this review, a few people scored it with a whopping 4.7 out of 10 on my anime list, so it may be one of the worst anime of all time if it even is an anime in the first place. But animation can go even lower than that. Forget anime with some animation. How about anime with no animation? Is such a thing even possible? Were you aware that there's this thing in Japan called a comic motion video? They're direct to VHS stories with only a couple of frames of artwork, not animation, art, and zero animation to speak of. The stories are told by narrating over stationary animation cells, and occasionally zooming in and shaking the whole screen to make it look like something's happening. They're done so cheaply that they don't even have art half the time. That's how little animation this is. They even pad out the rest of it with live action footage, just so they can cut back on ink as much as humanly possible. Don't forget Inferno Cop, the Japanese show that was made with no budget as a joke. A lot of people say that it's an anime, but Inferno Cop is just still images sliding around. So I'd argue it's more of a modern CMV. Anime may also depend on where you are. If you ask somebody in Japan what their favorite anime is, odds are they'll just say Frozen or some other Disney movie. To them, it's just the Japanese word for cartoon. Anime is a lot of things to a lot of people, but I hope this at least showed you how far you can stretch the definition before it breaks entirely. And I'm not trying to redefine the word or change public opinion, but I thought this would be a fun way to showcase a bunch of weird stuff, because I sure as hell wasn't about to do an entire video about the Pingu anime. Generally speaking, if it was a product of Japan and it was animated, even a little bit, it's probably an anime. And if you don't agree with that, look forward to my new video, anime that don't even exist. So what do you think anime is? Is it an art style? Is it just the Japanese word for cartoon? Or is it something else entirely? You know, now that I think about it, anime isn't even made in Japan anymore. It's all done in the Philippines and South Korea. So I don't know, you know, is anime even anime?
Puppets! 私、頑張ります！そりゃあ
Hey, Freddy, you gotta see this puppet show. It's terrific.
Earl, that's for kids.
Yeah, you'd think that because they're puppets. So the show seems to have a children's aesthetic. Yet the dialogue is unquestionably sharp-edged, witty, and thematically skewed to adults.
わけがわからないよ
I'm telling you, Fred, this show works on 2 levels.
They look like puppets. I'm not watching.